Responsive, responsible and reforms for Keluarga Malaysia. It is within this context that Budget 2023 is being formulated. To be announced this Friday, 7th October, this eagerly awaited budget will be the first in this post-COVID-19 era, and it comes on the back of Malaysia's strong economic growth trajectory, improving employment numbers and continued inflow of foreign direct investment. On top of the preparing of budget for the entire Keluarga Malaysia population, Budget 2023 will have to also look into the growth and development needs of Sabah and Sarawak. This includes better roads, from roads to electricity and water supplies, to education and better internet penetration, and everything in between. With a population of approximately 6 million people, Sabah and Sarawak are certainly key engines of socioeconomic growth for Malaysia. So, what does Budget 2023 have in store for Sabah and Sarawak? And where should these priorities be? To answer these questions and more, with us today is Yang Berhormat Datuk YAMANI HAFEZ, Deputy Finance Minister to Ministry of Finance Malaysia. Datuk, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
And today we'll be discussing enhancing socioeconomic growth for Sabah and Sarawak's socioeconomy. Datuk, I'd like to begin with Budget 2023 being tabled on Friday, looking forward. It's now a good time for us to look back at Budget 2022. How would you rate the success of Budget 2022 in general?
Well, I think first and foremost, I would like to talk about Malaysia's current economic position, where in this year, 2022, in the first quarter, there's a growth of 5%. And following towards that, we have a stronger growth at 8.9% on the second quarter. And this is supported by the job market and as well increased domestic activity and strong external demand. And I would like to add that the GDP growth for these 3 consecutive quarters is not a coincidence. And these are largely attributable to many of the policies and measures we put in place for Budget 2022. And these policies, alhamdulillah, have enabled many businesses to rebound and recover. However, I would like to say the outlook for 2023 is increasingly uncertain. And this is beyond our control because it's due to global developments such as the prolonged Russia-Ukraine military conflict and China's strict containment measures against COVID-19. And this as well put high pressures on commodity and food prices worldwide, supply chain disruptions, and the development of higher inflation. And this results in many countries to tighten their monetary policy adjustment, especially the US, which has been very aggressive, and unfortunately it affects global growth prospects. Therefore, for Budget 2023, as you rightly put out just then, we need to reinforce Malaysia's recovery while safeguarding our rakyat businesses against not only current but future challenges. And it's guided by the 3R approach, which is responsive, responsible and reformist. The approach emphasizes on being responsive to the people's current need, but at the same time, we need to be responsible in ensuring that we do not facilitate current needs at the expense of the future growth. So in striking the balance, we also need to be reformist in our approach to address key structural challenges and build upon our rakyat business competitiveness and resilience to deal with future challenges. So the government remain committed to elevate the rakyat's well-being and improve the competitiveness of business and strengthening, hopefully, the nation's resilience against future shocks.
Right. So I like that point that you've raised, that Budget 2022 has in fact led to 3 consecutive quarters of growth in the GDP. And as you mentioned, so the priorities this year is about continuing that momentum across lives, livelihoods and the economy as a whole. Now, my next question I'd like to ask you is, so not long after the budget was tabled, there were claims that it did not fully address the needs of East Malaysians. Of course, you are the Member of Parliament for Sepitang constituency, and that much of the national resources were allocated to those in Semenanjung. What are your thoughts on these claims?
I think we need to address a bit of this, I would call fallacy. I mean, in the spirit of Keluarga Malaysia and in line with our nation's vision of Wawasan Kemakmuran Bersama 2030, the government has never neglected or marginalized Sabah and Sarawak or any other state for that matter in its efforts to improve the state's socio-economic development. The fact is, if I can pull out some figures here, for both Sabah and Sarawak, First, the allocation of development expenditure, the DE, for Sarawak alone announced in budget 2022 is at 4.67 billion ringgit, an increase of 90 million ringgit compared to the previous year. And if we add up the DE allocation in 2022, where Sabah is receiving about 10.6% and Sarawak receiving 9.6%, it covers 20% of the total DE allocation provided for all states. Second, the largest recipient for the federal government's annual grant to the state government with a total allocation 2.43 billion ringgit, or more than 30%, includes the states of Sabah with 1.16 billion ringgit and the state of Sarawak with 1.27 billion ringgit, and almost 1.8 billion ringgit out of the total of 8.2 billion ringgit, or more than 20% of the allocation for Bantuan Keluarga Malaysia, BKM, benefits approximately 1.7 million recipients in Sabah and Sarawak, as well as monthly community welfare assistance, which also includes 20% of all recipients nationwide. And finally, in terms of operating expenses, for all government agencies, Sabah is the second largest state, while Sarawak ranks fourth largest. And in line with driving the state's growth, a special focus has also been given to the road infrastructure and basic infrastructure in the rural areas of Sabah and Sarawak.
Right.
And
if I may then ask, so going back, when you go back to your constituency, do you see these changes happening? And maybe you could share some things that have happened on the ground that you've seen.
Yeah, I mean, from where I am in Spitang, which is on the southern part, which connects through Lawas, Sarawak, our bordering neighbors. The Pan-Borneo Highway is being done, and for your information, the Pan-Borneo Highway, we've allocated about 2 billion ringgit, and 1.5 billion ringgit, or 60% of the total infrastructure allocation, also includes rural roads and rural water supply. In addition, a total of 649 million ringgit, or 85% of the allocation, is allocated to upgrade poor debilitated schools in Sabah and Sarawak. And we also put aside 20 million ringgit for the Native Customer Rights Program, both in Sabah and Sarawak. So furthermore, the government is also committed in improving the digital network, in providing a wider coverage and better broadband quality for the people, which also benefits the people in Sabah and Sarawak, especially in the rural areas, under the Plan Jalinan Digital Negara, or Jendela, with an allocation of 77 million ringgit for Sabah and 80 million ringgit for Sarawak. And various initiatives were created to improve the connectivity and the sustainable communication to ensure that no one is left behind in developing our beloved nation.
Right, and that's very interesting to know that the government is very focused across various areas like education, internet, road infrastructure, and so on and so forth. So what do you think would be the biggest successes of Budget 2022 as far as East Malaysia has been concerned?
I think it is clear that the priority has been given to Sabah and Sarawak, because other than the budget that I've mentioned earlier on in 22, the government has also added additional 500 million ringgit for both Sabah and Sarawak to implement small-scale projects such as maintenance, tourism infrastructure, improving social amenities, and improving health infrastructure, as well as smaller projects in the local authority, as well as micro-credit funds provision, especially for SMEs in Sabah and Sarawak.
Right. And based on that, how do you see the opportunities for young people to be involved in economic activity that's generated from all of these? When you speak to them, what have they expressed in terms of the opportunities at earning a living from what the budget has allocated for them?
Okay, for the young people, it has been a tough 2 years for them.
Right.
And so the help that we give in terms of easy access to small microfinancing, and also to support the half of the salary, some of the smaller workers, has helped them tremendously. Not to do well, but just to stay afloat.
Right.
So it helps them to sustain. I think that's the key thing here before the opening. Obviously, at the beginning of the year, when it starts opening, things have improved for them.
Right.
Not as vibrant as pre-pandemic, but things are started to look up for them, and hopefully it will continue till the end of this year.
Right, and that's an interesting point. So before we go for a commercial break, maybe your quick thoughts on, so what are some areas which this economic activity has been most active in, like whether it's tourism or infrastructure development or construction? Just any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think infrastructure is most badly hit.
Right.
And, they are the first to be affected, and unfortunately the last to be to rebound because, we have different protocols and policies in terms of people coming in and out of the country, especially for tourists outside of Malaysia. But things have improved a lot, and the tourism sector has improved slowly, not as much as what we want it to be, but it's an opportune time for us to upgrade the tourist digital presence and and also the infrastructure. So by the time when the numbers are starting to pick up, we are well and ready to receive tourist income from this from better arrivals of tourists in the future.
Right. Datuk, thank you so much for those thoughts. We'll be taking a short commercial break, and after the break, when we come back, I'd like to ask you a little bit about delivery of services, because while we often talk about the government being allocating all of this, we also have to understand there are challenges in delivering it to the people on the ground. So we'll be back right after this. We are back. Welcome back to the show. Today we are with YB Datuk YAMANI HAFEZ, the Deputy Finance Minister to Ministry of Finance Malaysia, and we're discussing enhancing socioeconomic growth for Sabah and Sarawak in line with the upcoming Budget 2023. Datuk, before the break, we were discussing about youth, job creation and opportunities. Could you share with us a little bit about the MCS?
Yeah, the mobile community services, or MCS, were tasked to provide services for the rakyat, especially those in the remote and rural areas, to ensure that everyone is being inclusive in the national development agenda. And among the services provided, Ministry of Finance license registration, and the CIDB Malaysia exhibition, which provides exposure and attracts young people to participate in TVET in the construction industry, and welfare services, as well as various interesting programs to their benefit. And in 2022, a total of 14 mobile community services, MCS, was scheduled to run, and reaches exceeding 25,000 visitors. And the last MCS for this year will be held in Lahad Datu on 8th of October 2022, while in Sarawak, 7 MCS has been scheduled with the attendance so far of almost 5,000 rural residents. And there are 2 more MCS programs held in Daro and Dalat on October 6th and October 7th, 2022 respectively. So I think it's been a great success bringing all those services to the rural areas, because there are challenges in terms of reaching to these people. So it has been well received, and I think we will continue on again if we see the opportunity to do it again next year, maybe.
Yeah, and in that sense, those of us in Semenanjung tend to take for granted that the ability to access these services. And when the MCS goes down to the ground, is there a lot of logistic challenges required? Maybe if you could share with us a little bit of that.
Yeah, certain areas, definitely. There are certain areas, you need to go by boat. And then we discovered there are some, the BKM recipients, Bantuan Keluarga Malaysia recipients, who held no bank accounts, especially those on the remote areas. And we took the initiative to implement this cash payment method to meet the needs of the rural communities through, if you've heard of the Bank Bergerak or mobile bank services, to make it easier for more recipients to access various banking services, including account opening, savings, withdrawal, money transfer, bill payment and digital banking. And then we also implement direct cash payments by the Treasury of Malaysia Sabah, or PMS Sabah, and the Treasury of Malaysia Sarawak, or PM Sarawak, in collaboration with the Lembaga Hasil Dalam Negeri, together with Bank Simpanan Nasional. And this year alone, this program has been successfully reached in 19 remote locations in the rural area of Sabah, including Pulau Bangi, Nabawan, Kunak and Telupit. While in Sarawak, it reaches 32 locations, which involve Sungai Asap, Pakan, Julau, Lingga, Pusa and Subayau.
Right, and I've heard that the officers from Bank Simpanan and Perbandra Malaysia, Sabah and Sarawak have to, cross rivers, climb hills, and just do all sorts of things to get into the people there. So, on this, I understand that in Budget 2022, 209 million was allocated as subsidies for rural air services, especially in the States. So how has this helped help the people, especially after the reopening? Because you mentioned not everyone has a bank account. And so how have these subsidies helped the people, and what would your call out to them be in order to be able to access these services even more?
Yeah. I mean, the rural air services, or RAS we call them, are air services that are offered to the interior of East Malaysia, where air transport is the important way for the people in rural areas to get other parts of the country. So while it is possible to drive throughout Sabah and Sarawak, but the size and the quality of roads make it quite impractical. So as a result, river transportation is actually the second best option, particularly popular in Sarawak, due to large number of navigable rivers, then Sungai Rajang being the most popular.
That's right.
And most of East Malaysia's rural areas can only be reached by boat or by plane anyway. So for those living in rural areas with the terrain that covered in deep jungle, and air travel is probably the only practical option given the current situation. Therefore, in Sabah and Sarawak, we have what we call the short takeoff and landing airports, or stall ports, they call them, located within a minimum of 30 minutes of a couple of hours of each other by air, and something that would take more than a week or 14 days by land, sea, or river boat. So the stall port locations in Sabah is at area called Long Pasian Sempurna, while those in Sarawak is at Bekalalan, Bario, Belaga, Kapit, Lawas, Long Aka, Long Banga, Long Lelang, Long Semado, Long Seradan, Marudi, Mukah, and Tanjung Manis.
Right.
So the federal government oversees the RAS program, and airlines that fly on RAS routes may be eligible for subsidies, because the RAS initiative has actually assisted the communities in obtaining essential items, especially those who are seeking medical and emergency assistance. And additionally, this program has also greatly benefited the children in those areas, especially those ones to obtain higher quality education, which have helped improve their communities in many ways.
Yeah, I mean, it's truly really special to hear of these challenges, and even to think about the short landing bases that have to be 30 minutes from any given space. And if we didn't have that, it's hard to almost imagine 7 to 14 days of road travel through jungles and all to get to these places, which also goes to show that Sarawak and Sabah have immense potential when it comes to growth. So I'd like to ask you next, the government allocated 1.5 billion for development of rural infrastructure in Sabah and Sarawak. Can you enlighten our viewers on how these funds were spent, and what were among the key projects that have been undertaken here?
Yeah, an addition of the 1.5 billion ringgit, or 60% of the total rural infrastructure allocation, includes rural roads and rural water supply allocated Sabah and Sarawak. And among the key projects are the road upgrading from Jalan Kampung Mendamai to Kampung Pinapak Pitas, which cost 5 million ringgit. And also the construction of 1.445 kilometers road in Mesej Tebatu Paitan with allocation of 15.5 million ringgit. And a bridge construction at Sungai Kepuakan Ranau costing 12 million ringgit. And construction of road in Jalan Ulukrian Seratok, Sarawak, Phase 2, which costing 16 million ringgit. Right.
So, based on all these allocations, how have you seen economic activity change in line with this? And how do you see this change in the next 3 to 5 years from now, the mid to the slightly longer term in these areas?
I think in these areas, especially when Pan-Borneo Highway is fully done, I think it will help to in the movement of goods, and those places which is inaccessible now will have some economic value for them to move around their goods around the state itself, and this will indirectly help those who are inaccessible, not only physically through roads and water supply and so on, but we also want them to be accessible digitally. I think that's very important, and it will change their life, and then I think it will improve the livelihoods of especially those who stay quite far away from the major cities and major areas.
Right. Of course, digital growth is something that's very important. The young people are all very much interconnected. What are your then hopes when you talk about the digital connection and what it can spur for Sabah and Sarawak, or perhaps even your constituency?
I think digital growth is very important, because at the end of the day, the digital growth will try to reduce I don't like to use the word, but the schism, the divide between the rural areas and the urban areas. So, equal access is important in that sense, where the opportunities digitally will greatly improve not only in terms of education, but in terms of businesses, small businesses, and so on. So I think digital access to rural areas, especially in my constituency, is very important for them to move forward in terms of businesses, to achieve the global access, so to speak, for their businesses and for their education.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And with the days remaining before the tabling of Budget 2023, what do you see as the key lessons that the government has learnt from last year's budget as far as Sabah and Sarawak are concerned?
I think the key lesson, is that our fiscal policy must strike a balance between increasing revenues and spending efficiently, and ensuring that sufficient social protection for lower income groups are important actually to encourage more comprehensive growth. And while higher fiscal spending in response to the pandemic has helped support the economy, it has also unfortunately led to further narrowing of the fiscal space. And with that being said, we need an explicit policy framework that needs to be formulated to directly address the challenges faced by lagging states such as Kedah, Perlis, Kelantan, Sabah and Sarawak, characterized with the lowest average income and highest poverty rate. So with the right governmental support systems and prudent fiscal steps in place, I think Malaysia's economy can expand beyond a return to pre-pandemic levels, and hopefully towards achieving significant long-term developmental goals.
Right. The point that you raised at the end about overcoming the lag in certain states was, I believe, from a World Bank report. And the World Bank, one of the heads actually said that if Sabah prospers, the whole of Malaysia prospers. Why do you think that that's the case?
I think not only if Sabah, I think if Sabah East Malaysia prospers, I think the whole of Malaysia prospers, because it will address the fallacy that's people saying that there are gaps between West Malaysia and East Malaysia. Because if we address the issues in East Malaysia, it will drive East and West Malaysia closer together, and I think that will create a stronger Malaysia into the future. I think that's how I see it when the World Bank give the comment.
Very interesting. I read somewhere that in Sabah and Sarawak, about 45 to 50% are actually young people between the ages and 40. You're, of course, one of the young deputy ministers around. What are your hopes and aspirations for them, and sort of part of the larger Keluarga Malaysia aspirations in terms of integration and the social aspect?
Yes, I think millennials, they are different. They are now more open, and they are more aware of their surroundings. And then, I'm hoping for them to exercise their rights, especially coming to voting, because there's no excuse for them not to vote now, because it's already all been automated. Those who are 18 and above will be automatically registered, and I think they should exercise their rights according to how they feel. They will be it's not too much to say that they will direct the future of this country.
Right. Datuk, thank you very much, and I think that was just a great ending to our discussion today. That's really all the time we have here. Thank you very much for those of you who are joining us at home. We've been in discussion with YB Datuk YAMANI HAFEZ MUSA, Deputy Finance Minister 2, Ministry of Finance Malaysia, and we have been discussing enhancing socioeconomic growth for Sabah and Sarawak. We hope that you've enjoyed the show, and we'll see you next time. Thank you for being with us today. I'm Danial Rahman.